Hey guys, in this episode I'm going to talk about MVVM architecture for your Blazor WebAssembly applications. Let's first talk about why do we need to follow this architecture, and then I'll talk about how can you add this architecture in your application. Okay, so in the last episode we talked about how we can add a database, and then how can we create tables and add some data into it. Then we used entity framework core to pull the data from the database, and then we show it on our razor component, right? Let's assume that I want to add a search functionality to this page. One way to complete this enhancement is by writing some code on the search click event, where it will take the property which is bound to this text box and filter the contact list by it. That'll add some fair amount of code in your code behind, right? What if you want to migrate to some other UI framework? What if there is something which is better than Blazor? Do you rewrite that code again for that UI framework? Let's say you want to create a mobile application, a Xamarin application for your same Blazor application. Do you rewrite all that search functionality for your mobile application? That's not productive, right? Let's assume another use case where I have first name and last name and email address on my page, and which are tightly coupled to my model. You can see that email address, first name and last name, they are tightly coupled to my table, so that it's easier to follow this architecture. But what if my client wants me to add full name instead of adding first name and last name? Again, I'll have to write some code in my code behind saying that full name is concatenation of first name and last name. And this is just for one field. You could have thousands of fields for thousands of pages, and that could create a lot of code and a lot of confusion for the other developers. That means you cannot have your UI tightly coupled with your table. You need to have some separation between these two layers. And that's what MVVM is. If you follow MVVM architecture, you'll add a view model, which is any other C# class, in which you can add all the properties that you want to add it on your UI, so that you have all the freedom that you can have for your UI components. You can customize your UI components because you have the freedom of adding all the fields. And then you map those fields with the properties of your view model. You can also write the code behind which you're writing for your razor components in the view model, so that if you want to move to other UI framework, or even if you're making a Xamarin application, you can just take all of your C# code with you and just write UI layers for your applications. And that's why MVVM is awesome. So in this episode, what we're going to do, we are going to work on this profile page, in which I'm going to add view model for this page, which is going to be a profile view model. And then I'm going to bind the properties first name, last name, and email address to view model, and then convert this view model to model, and then update my database instead of directly updating my database. Okay, so yeah, let's check out our demo. For that, I'm going to minimize this and go to my browser, and I have three fields here. I have first name, last name, and email address. And then I have two buttons, which is update profile, which shows the message profile updated successfully. Then I have get profile, which gets the profile and says profile loaded successfully. So the UI is pretty simple, which I have like, three input text boxes, and then I have two buttons, which is calling C# functions. And these C# functions are updating the message, which is one of the properties, and it is bound to the profile UI component. Okay, but like I said, we are not going to have any properties on our razor component. We'll have all the properties in our view model. So let's go ahead and create that view model. So I'm going to go to my client project and create a folder and call it as view models. Okay, view models. And here I'm gonna add the profile view model. So I'm gonna say that we're gonna need a view model which is associated with the profile UI. So I'm gonna say profile view model.cs. Okay, let's add a namespace for this. So I'm gonna say namespace, blazing chat, view models. Okay, view models. All right. This will have one public class, which is going to be profile view models, of course. So I'm going to copy that and paste it here. And like I said, this model, this view model is going to have all the properties that you want to bind it to your UI. So I'm gonna copy this, cut this property message, and I'm gonna put it in my profile view model. I'm gonna say that this is message. It should not be bound to directly to the razor component. It should be bound to the view model, which has all the properties. Okay, so once I cut that property and put it in my view model, you can see that it's throwing an error saying that we cannot find message anymore because it's in view model. So let's go ahead and add that namespace. I'm going to say that let's not use that message, use message from the view model. So for that, I'm going to create a reference of the view model. So I'm going to say that profile view model, let's create a private reference. I'm going to say private profile view model underscore profile view model, and I'm going to initialize this so it doesn't throw any errors. And what I'm doing here is I added this view model which has the message property and of this UI, and I initialized that view model. And now instead of using this message here, I want to use the message which is there in my profile view model. So I'm going to say that use that message instead of using the message which is not there anymore. And I'll have to replace this messages too, because we don't have that property anymore. So I'm going to say profile view model message and profile view model message. Okay, all right, let's run this and see if this is working or not. So I'm going to rerun this and go to my browser and wait for it to finish. Okay, I'm going to refresh my my page, and if I click on update profile, you can see that it's still working fine. So I added the property which was bound to my UI to a view model and created a reference of the view model, and I can still work with my UI. And same thing we are going to do with the other properties too. Like I said, we don't want to have any properties in a UI, so I'm going to cut all of these properties and then put it in my view model. Okay, I'm going to put it in my view model here. Let's format it. Awesome. So now I have no properties. All the properties are there in profile view model. Let's go ahead and bind these properties to our view model. So what I want to do, I want to get the model from the tables and convert into view model, and then the view model which is bound to these properties will get populated with the data which is coming from our database. So the flow is going to be like this. Okay, so let's bind this view models first to our properties, to our controls, and then I'm going to say bind value. Bind value is going to be profile view model first name, and let's do the same thing for the other fields too. So I'm going to copy that, paste it here, and say this is last name, and this is email address. Okay, email address. Okay, so now I have no properties on my user component. All the properties are there in the view model, but we'll have to get the profile from the database. For that, I've already written some code in my user controller. So if I go to my user controller, you can see that I wrote this function which says which takes user ID as parameter, and then it checks in the database if the user is present or not, and then it returns the model back to the client, so that we don't have any conversion logic to convert our model into our view models. But before that, we need to have these models in our client. You can see that these models are in a server project. So we need to have copy of these models somewhere so that we could use these models for catching the data from the web API. So for that, you can see in our client project, we have a reference to the shared project. So what I can do, I can put all the models, the copy of all the models in the shared project. So I'm going to go to my shared project and say that I have a new folder, which is going to be models. And I'm going to create a copy of this user and chat history. And then I'm going to put it in my models here. Okay. And then these, the namespaces of these models should be shared because they are not in server anymore. These should be shared, and then so of chat history. Okay, so now that we added these models into our shared project, we should have access to catching these models in our profile page. So what I'm gonna do to call this web API, which is in our server project, to call this web API get profile, I'm gonna need to inject HTTP client on my profile page. So I'm gonna go to my profile page and see that I want to inject HTTP client, HTTP client, and then use that HTTP client for getting the profile from the user. So I'm gonna add that code in my get profile, saying that it's await and HTTP client get from JSON, and here I want to get it into my user, so I'm gonna say user, and then I'm gonna write the string of the web API, the web API address. So I'm gonna say user get profile, and when we're gonna need to pass the user ID that we want to get profile of. So I'm gonna pass 10, and you can see that it's throwing error because it doesn't know what this user is. So I'm gonna say that control dot, and we would like to add blazing chat shared model user. I'm just gonna add this as using statement so that we don't have to see this namespace here. I'm gonna go to my profile page and I'm gonna say using blazing, just paste it so that we have it. Okay, so now this is an async function, so we'll have to convert this function into async function, async task, and then we have the user from our shared project, which is coming from our server, and then we want to catch it into our user, which is a model. So I'm gonna say that it's a model. Okay, so now you can see that we have the model, but we are not binding the model. We are not binding our database tables directly to our UI. We have this view model layer where we have to convert, convert our view model into view model. Okay, so for that, what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna go to my view model and say that I want to create a implicit operator. So I'm gonna say that public static implicit operator, which will give me user whenever I pass profile view model, which will give me profile view model whenever I pass user. Whenever I pass user, and it doesn't know what user is because we haven't added the namespaces. So let's add that. We're going to add using statement, and what I'm trying to do here is I want to return profile view model whenever I get the user from the database. I want to convert that model into view model so that I can bind it to my UI. So I'm going to say return new profile view model, and what I want to do is I want to write the conversion logic here so that I will map all the fields that I want to map it from the model, which is coming from the database, to the view model so that I can show it on the UI. So the first name of the view model will be the first name of the model. The last name of the view model is going to be the last name of the model. The email address of the view model is going to be the email address of the model. And the user ID of the view model is going to be user ID of the model. And that's how you write the conversion only once and use this operator everywhere. And if you want to use that operator, the only thing that you need to do is you need to say that my profile view model should get assigned to user, which is coming from the database. And that's it. That's the only thing that you have to do in order to convert your model into view model. Let's run this and see if this is working or not. So I'm gonna go to my browser here and refresh the page. And whenever I click on get profile, it will load the information of user ID John Smith, the email address of John Smith from the database. If you want to go to the database and show table, you can see the user ID 10 is John Smith. Awesome, right? So what we did here, we converted our model, which is coming from the database, to view model, and then we showed it on our database. Now, what I want to do, I want to convert my view model. So whenever I click on update profile, I want to convert my view model into model and then update my database. Okay, so let's try to do that. For that, I'm gonna go to my VS Code again, and then I already have written the function which will update my profile. So you can see that it's an HTTP put method which takes user ID as input, gets the user ID and updates the user ID with the first name, last name, and the email address. And I want to call this web API whenever I want to update my profile, so that it updates the first name, last name, and email address by whatever you enter in the controls. Okay, so I'm gonna do the same thing. I'm gonna go to my update profile, and here I want to call put function, put method, which is going to be await HTTP client, and I want to say put as JSON async, and here I want to pass the string of the web API that I want to call. Okay, so I'm going to say user and update profile. That will call my web API, and then I want to pass the user ID that I want to update to. Okay, and then here also we'll have to pass the object that you want to update. So this is going to take user model as input, so we can't really pass view model. So we'll have to convert now. We'll now have to convert our view model into model, not from model to view model. Okay, so for that, I'm gonna go to my view model again, and just like I wrote a operator for converting my user into view model, I need to write another operator to convert my my profile view model into user. So I'm gonna say that this will return a user. And it will take profile view model as a parameter. So I'm going to change that to profile view model. Okay, and then I'm gonna go to my user and update all this, because here what we're doing is we're converting our profile view model into our model, and that will get sent to the API, and that will update my user in the database. So for that, what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna create a property, create a variable user, which is going to get converted from profile view model to user. So just like we just like we converted a user into view model, we are converting a view model into user, which is a model, and that's what I'm going to pass here. This is an async function, so we'll have to change this function to async task, and that should fix the problem. Okay, so now let's run our application and see if it converts our view model into model and then updates the data in our database or not. So I'm gonna go back, stop this, run it again, and then go back to the UI, and then refresh my page. And I'm gonna get the profile, which will get John Smith's name. And here I'm going to change the values, and then I'm going to click on update profile. Okay, and that says that profile updated successfully. Let's go to some other page and come back and get profile. You can see that data persists the same. So that means it updated the data in our database. If I go to my database and show the table, you can see that John Smith 1, John Smith, John 1, Smith 1. Okay, that's awesome, right? So this is how you can follow MVVM architecture in your Blazor server application, Blazor WebAssembly application. In the next episode, I'm going to talk about how you can inject these view models into your UI so that you don't even have to write this code. You don't even have to write this piece of code into your Razor components. You can write this piece of code into your view model, and just inject view model into your UI so that you can call all the functions from the view model. And we're going to talk about dependency injection too. So hopefully, I'll see you soon. If you have any questions about this video, you can contact me on Twitter or Facebook. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching. Bye.